I don't think awakening is a rare thing. I don't think it's well represented, thinking that awakening is some mysterious, odd thing that happens once in a blue moon. I think it's much more ordinary. It's just, if we don't have a context to put it into, it might just be glossed over. And the reason I think that is because that's what it was like for me. The first time, like looking back in the mirror, the first time I had this flavor of that I am not who I think I am. There is something inherent in me overflowing that is not dependent on the world, that is not dependent on my life circumstances. Yes, and I'd like to share that story with you and hear what your insights are about that or how you relate to that. So, I am brought up in Sweden, and it's quite an agnostic or atheistic society. Traditionally, it's like a Christian values society, and I did go to church with my parents and with school sometimes, and but other than that, like there's been no practicing religion of my parents or even my grandparents, as far as I know. So religion for me was more of a traditional thing. It's not like I haven't been exposed to the wisdom of religion. It just didn't speak to me. I couldn't anchor it into any lived experience. I didn't see religion or religious practices as pointers. So why this connects to this specific story is that I was still very much in this, not interested in spirituality. But then there was one day when I was walking down one of the main avenues in Gothenburg. It was a spring day, the sun was up, and there was must have been not a weekend because there's like people going about their day. And something about that moment, it was like I was just overflown with so much love, and I was at peace. And I was quite surprised because there was nothing in my life circumstances at that moment that would have brought about that much happiness. That would make me look at people and go like, wow, I just feel so much warmth towards them. And I remember having this odd thought where I'm like, this has to be what people mean when they say that they found Jesus. This got to be what they're experiencing. And it was like I was still in the world, but like someone has just unveiled something. And I just saw beauty and love, and I had no desire to be anywhere else. I was not in a rush, even though I was walking quite, I was moving my body to get to a destination. And it didn't last very long. It could have lasted for maybe 20 seconds or 30 seconds, like under a minute. But it didn't really, now looking back, I'm quite surprised it didn't. It didn't leave a bigger imprint on me. I mean, I think it did subconsciously because that was probably part of the unfoldment that happened years later, where I started meditating and started turning towards spiritual traditions and starting to question what I'd been taught about the world and reality. And yes, but then it was just an odd experience that I had. And I think that this is common. This happens to people regularly. But since it's so much at odds with what we have founded our society on, or like the materialistic paradigm that we are this body composed of matter, which is in itself dead. It has no aliveness, it's just building blocks. And once those building blocks gets complex enough, my consciousness arises out of this matter. That means that my inner life is completely separate from the rest of the world. It's separate from your mind, because you have your consciousness in there locked up. And when I die, this consciousness and all my memories and all my thoughts, they're just going to evaporate like they never even existed. And when I feel happy, it's because the world circumstances have aligned in a way that makes me happy. So the world is kind of holding the reins of how happy I am. And love is not something that's ever present. It's when people or circumstances have done something to deserve my love, or when I deserve love. It's not necessarily that you'd have to think about love as a transaction, but the model itself suggests that feeling love is not your natural condition. It's dependent on the outside world. When we are stooped in those understanding of reality, then these odd little pop-ups of feeling love overflowing and being happy for no reason, they're odd for us. They don't fit into this model. So we tend to ignore them. While if we lived in a different society, me for instance, I am much more in favor of non-dualism, for instance, that views consciousness as the underlying force of the nature which builds up everyone and everything. That turns the whole understanding of reality, me interpreting the world, it turns it upside down. And if I have an experience of this like a spontaneous awakening, when my model of reality looks like this, then I have a whole different context of putting that experience into. I can allow it to reshape me from the inside. At least this is my belief, or this is how I understand it. That actually our modern day understanding of the world makes these spontaneous awakenings not take root the way they could have done. Yes. Because the only way I knew how to root my own experience was this is what it must feel like to have found Jesus. Because that was the only reference point I had to people describing this feeling. But Christianity, or the way it was conveyed, just to be sure, I think I'm not dissing Christianity. I think there are deep wisdoms in it. But the way I had been presented with Christianity, it was not emphasis on these deep wisdoms. It was more of a story about a man who lived back in the days, and that there's a God, a man sitting on a cloud. And with that understanding of Christianity, I couldn't really marry it with the way I lived in society. So almost like my understanding of spirituality was so out of sync with the everyday life I live in. And that's a shame. That's a loss for the individual, but it's also a loss from society as a whole, that we're blocking people from having these realizations about who they are, allowing love to flow. Being the root, or being the essence, like the fountain of their own happiness. Yeah. So that's the reason I don't think awakening is something odd. It just needs a context to land, to be able to bloom, to sprout. What do you think about that? What's your experience? please do share in the comment section, and I hope to see you next time, my friend.